Okay, so prospecting as an SDR. Now, this is going to be quite a long video, by the way, so I'm actually going to cut to another video that I filmed around prospecting for account executives. The same content is exactly relevant for you. So if you see me using account executive language, that's because just swap it in for SDR, right? The content of that is the same, right? In terms of prospecting is prospecting. It's not rocket science. It doesn't matter if you're an account executive, a senior account executive, a freaking enterprise account executive, whatever you are, prospecting is prospecting. And it goes back to a number of key concepts, which I'm going to cover in this video, which is multi-threaded prospecting, triples, which ties into multi-threaded prospecting, your warm call structure. I hate using cold call because at the end of the day, it's not a cold call. You can find a way to warm it up. And I talk about the 3 ways you can warm up any call. And then I'll talk to you about no-nos. Okay. So some things that you just do not say. And I've heard some shocking stuff from SDRs, right? And I'm not saying that from a place of being mean. I'm saying that because no one's ever told you, right? Like I know so many SDR managers that were fucking terrible SDRs that just wanted to get promoted into some sort of management role. And so now that they're in a management role, they're like, fantastic, I don't need to get on the phones anymore. I can stay removed from everything, right? They become professional SDR managers. And to all the SDR managers that are watching, I'm sorry if I'm being a bit mean, okay? But it's so important that you stay a practitioner. It's so important that if you're an SDR manager watching this, it's so important that you make calls with your team. You want to get on the front foot with your team, right? And this is one of my favorite things to do when I was an account executive and I had hit my quota for the quarter, for example, and it was like a Friday afternoon and I was bored. I would go to the SDR pod, like all the SDRs in CrowdStrike, for example, were all in like one part of the office. And for any of you that are from CrowdStrike in Australia and you're in the Sydney office, I don't know if you've changed offices, but back when I was there, the office I believe was on Walker Street, and there was one part of the office where all of you would hang out. And on a Friday afternoon, if I was bored shitless and I'd hit my number for the quarter and I just wanted to go have some fun, I would go to the SDRs and I would literally pull out a coin and I would say heads or tails. If it's a heads, I'll make a call for you. And the number of times I ended up just getting a whole bunch of heads and I would end up making calls for my SDRs, right? But it was good fun, right? It's so important that you lead from the front. If you're an AE, you want to lead from the front. If you're an SDR manager, lead from the front. If you're an SDR, make sure that you watch this video because I have a bunch of stuff that I'll tell you that you shouldn't do on a call so you don't sound like an idiot, okay? So I want to help you guys. So like with all of these videos, notes, take plenty of notes, pause, rewatch, like just get absorbed in this content. Don't switch off this video. Don't go do something else. Don't multitask, okay? Really dial in. It will help you be successful, I promise. If you need to download any of the assets that I walk through in this call, any of the scripts, just go down below. My team has a link down there. Download them, okay? And if you're dialing into this video or you're clicking into this video cold with no context, this is part of a series. So again, my team will have a playlist down below. Open that on a separate window. Just go binge watch the shit out of all of the SDR Readiness series. Or if you're an account executive or about to be an account executive, go watch the Account Executive Readiness series. It will make your life easier. Anyways, let's dive into this. Now, I'm going to do a quick bit of scene setting here. Before we get into the technical stuff, which I will absolutely get into in terms of finding out your prospecting targets. We've already done territory mapping, but account mapping, multi-threaded prospecting, like we're going to cover all of that stuff in this video. The first thing I want to just open off with, I don't want to be that, boring mindset guy, so I'm not going to harp on this for too long, but this is so important that we set the scene with the prospecting hustle mindset. And I'll just share 3 things with you. Firstly, you're never too damn important to pick up the phone and dial. And the reason I have Mark Cuban's photo over here is some of you might know this, but when he took over the Dallas Mavericks, the basketball team, and he was the owner of the Dallas Mavericks, not the CEO, the freaking owner, he would get people to the Dallas Mavericks games by cold calling them. He would literally call them up. He'd be like, hey, this is Mark Cuban. I'm the owner of the Dallas Mavericks. I can see that you're in the Dallas area. If you'd like to, I'd love to have you along at a Dallas Mavericks game. How about I get you a discounted ticket? We'd love to get you along. As soon as he got them to the games and they saw the games and they loved it, they were like, oh, this is fantastic. He would sell them season passes. He single-handedly drove that culture from the bottom up. He got everyone firing. And so the reason I share that for you or with you is because you're never too important to pick up the phone and dial if you're an account executive, right? Like that's literally our job. That's literally what we do. Our job is to bring dollars into the business. And just because you have an SDR or you have channel or you have marketing doesn't mean you don't do your own self-generated pipeline, right? That is a mindset that you want to get out of your head. So the second thing that I will share, every customer has a problem. You are trying to find the CEO of the problem. This is the mindset you have to have when you are prospecting. I know a lot of account executives that are fucking terrified to pick up the phone. You don't have to be if you know that your job is not to sell to them. Your job is to figure out, is the person you're calling responsible for a problem that they have that you can solve, aka the CEO of the problem. Number 3, sales is a contact sport. You do not want to be an armchair quarterback. I've seen so many account executives, as soon as they get that promotion, they've got that AE title, they start becoming armchair quarterbacks. They're like sitting back. They're like, yeah, I'm going to let my SDR do the job for me. I'm going to just let my engineer do my sales cycles for me. I'm going to let my managers do my closing for me. Like, no, I get that you are going to be quarterbacking a bit of a team now because you do have an SDR, you have channel account managers, you have marketing, you can leverage your managers. Like these are all things you can do, but that doesn't mean you're an armchair quarterback. You got to get in the fucking game. And the best way to get in the game is by doing your own pipeline generation, right? So it's so important. Okay, now let's get into the next part. I just realized I do a lot of this clapping thing, right? But I feel like it wakes people up. And if you can't tell, I've had far too much caffeine today. But this is such an important concept. I call it your golden numbers. This is something that I learned from when I was at Gartner. My manager at the time was an absolute legend. And he basically told me, look, Joe, there's 2 ways you can attack your forecast and two ways you can attack your quota. 1, you can think about deals and you will go mad. Or 2, you can think about how many meetings do I need to book every week to have enough pipeline. If you have enough pipeline, you can close the pipeline because the closing part is sales execution. I will show you how to do that. But if you don't have any fucking pipeline, you don't have discoveries coming out of the wazoo, you don't have, 4 to 5 new discoveries every week consistently, at least 3 new discoveries consistently every week, you're going to find yourself in hot water pretty quickly, right? Like your calendar should not be empty. If it's empty, you should be prospecting. You should have big blocks that just saying prospecting, right? That's if your calendar's empty. If not, you should have some prospecting, lots of discoveries, lots of demos, some negotiations, slash, go, no-go meetings and deal viability meetings. You should have some proof of concepts. Like you should have a lot of shit happening in your calendar, right? The moment my calendar started to get empty, I was like booking meetings, man. I was getting out there and starting to generate pipeline. So, staying sane, find your golden number. How do you find your golden number? Well, that's a good question. I'm glad you asked. Well, I have a tool for you. So this is a nice little calculator to find your golden number. Now, let's say, for example, you are a typical commercial rep. You're probably rolling with like a 6 to maybe 700K quota per annum in USD ACV or annual contract value. This will be different if you're not a SaaS rep. If you are a services rep, then this number will probably be different. It'll probably be closer into the millions in terms of services revenue, and it will probably be something else in terms of services GP or gross profit. But if you're a SaaS rep, software as a service, it's probably somewhere between 600 to 750. I haven't seen too many commercial account executives roll with anything more than that. You do get some outlier roles where they'll give you like $1 million commercial account exec quota, which is kind of retarded, but should be somewhere between 600 and 750. If you're really lucky, you'll be working for a company that has like a $400,000 or $500,000 US quota, which is even more achievable, right? So let's say your annual number is 600,000, because that was my last quota when I was at CrowdStrike. And let's say my average deal size was 50,000. Realistically, my average deal size was like closer to 65,000, if I was being honest. So if you punch your details in here, right? If you punch your details in here, this will start to tell you what your golden number is. Now, don't worry so much about this. So all you really need to fill out is, you don't need to fill this out. So I'm just going to say, don't fill this out, right? So leave that one not filled out. So all you need to do is just fill out this one and this one, and it'll automatically flow through. Essentially what it's going to tell you is number 4, that 4 is your golden number. That is how many discoveries you need to book every fucking week. That is the only number you can truly control. So in a quarter, you should be booking 49 discoveries. So you have 12 weeks in a quarter. You have 4 discoveries a week, 48, 49 discoveries. This is obviously rounding. So you should be booking 4 discoveries a week. Now, does that mean you have to book all 4 discoveries? No, you can split this up. So this is where you can say, hey, I would like 1 discovery from channel, 1 discovery from or ideally 1 to 2 discoveries from my SDR, and 1 to 2 discoveries from myself. So that way, if you sort of aim for those numbers, then if your SDR only books 1, you make sure you get the other 2. Hopefully your channel gets you 1. You're going to have other weeks where your channel gets you nothing, your SDR gets you 2, you get you 2, this is how you work those numbers, right? So it's so important that you as an account executive know your dashboard and you know how many numbers or how many discoveries you need to be getting each week. As long as you're doing your 4 a week, you are good, right? Because like I said, the rest is sales execution. We can work on that. We can get you better at discoveries. We can get you better at demos. We can get you better at deal viability meetings / post-demo feedback meetings. We can get you better at go, no-go meetings. We can improve your POC win rate by having a better POC process or a POV process. But what you can't do is any of that stuff if you don't have fucking pipeline, right? If you don't have deals that you're actually getting into the pipeline, you're fucked, okay? So that's where you want to start, okay? So that's your golden number. Now, I basically effectively talk about that over here, so I'm not going to go through that all over again, but essentially that's the only thing you can control. So control it, yeah? Now, how do you go about controlling it? Now, I've talked to you already about territory mapping, so you should have mapped your territory. That's in a previous module. So like I said, this stuff all builds on each other. There's only so much I can talk to you in a single video. So open up the playlist in the description below in a separate tab, and have that loaded up there so you can have a look at how you do your territory mapping, which is going to help you with this. Now, assuming you've done your territory mapping, we are now going into the setup for prospecting. So typically I break up prospecting into 3 parts. 1 is making sure you have the right mindset. 2 is making sure you have the right operating habits, aka account mapping, prospecting setup blocks, calendarizing prospecting, and then 3 is the prospecting execution, which looks at multi-threaded prospecting as well as your pitch, right? How do you actually get on the phones and do that? So like I said, I'm going to take you through a lot today, so just plonk yourself down, take notes, get your coffee, whatever, and just stay tuned in. We're just going to go for a bit of a marathon today, but trust me, this will be useful. So this is such an important part of getting set up for prospecting, right? Now, one of the things that I am really firm on and really adamant about is making sure that you're doing sufficient account mapping activities in your what I like to call your PG, your weekly PG planning blocks, right? PG stands for pipeline generation. Lingo that we used to use when I was at Zscaler. I like using it. So you want to make sure that every week you have time set aside, at least 2 blocks. I say 45 to 60 minutes, but ideally I'd say 90 minutes a pop, right? If you can squeeze 2 90-minute blocks out where all you're doing is going through your accounts. So what I would do is I would pick, if you're a commercial account executive, I would pick 5 accounts fortnightly right? And what you are doing is you're picking those 5 accounts and you're finding ideally 3 to 5 contacts a pop. So you've got 25 ideally contacts that you have lined up for a 2-week prospecting sprint. Now you're probably looking at that and going, wait, you're only prospecting to them for 2 weeks. It's like, yes, but what you're doing for those 2 weeks is you're picking these 5 accounts and your goal is to try to book as many fucking discoveries into those 25 prospects that you are targeting. And the reason you do it this way is it gives you focus. Because if you're staring at, typically a commercial account executive could have up to 100 accounts, right? 100 to 200 accounts. I know commercial account executives that have like 300, 400 accounts, right? Like, what you want to do is you want to start off by tiering them. So you have your tier 1s, your tier 2s, you dump your tier 3s, or you put them into you basically just say, hey, these are just email nurtures. I don't really care about them. And so that way what you're doing is you're focusing on your tier 1s and tier 2s. So every week you're taking maybe 1 or 2 tier 1s, 2 to 3 tier 2s, and likewise for your SDR as well, right? You're maybe giving them 5 accounts or 3 accounts, right? You're giving them 5 contacts each. So that way you've got 15 contacts that they can go after, or maybe more, maybe 20 contacts, right? I wouldn't overload them, make them focus. So that way in a 2-week sprint, you and your SDR are covering around 45 to 50 contacts. And your goal is to try to book as many discoveries into those 50 contacts together. This is a really focused, effective way, right? The best way to eat an elephant is 1 bite at a time. So take a big fat territory, tier it, and then in your PG planning blocks, which you want to have 2 of those calendared every week. Like, I'll talk to you about this even more when I go into the operating rhythm or the operational rhythm. But essentially your operational rhythm is how are you running your weeks, right? So you want to make sure that you have these blocks. So I have 2 blocks here for 90 minutes. Well, they're actually 2 hours, but I gave it a bit of extra time. I made sure I had a bit of buffer in there if I was a bit slow that day. But essentially you want to make sure that you've got, 1 block over here and another block over there where all you're doing is setting up for prospecting, right? It's so important to set yourself up for success. I'll go into what that exactly looks like in terms of what you're doing in that block. But essentially, those are 2 mandatory blocks that you want to make sure that you absolutely have in your calendar to be able to set up effectively. Now, I'll talk to you about exactly what goes into those blocks, right? All right, so when we're talking about PG planning or pipeline generation planning, this is a way you can do it. This is not like the hard and fast or the only way you do it, but I personally love using this tool and I use it in conjunction with my CRM. So I'll explain to you what I mean. So essentially I use this spreadsheet over here and it's a very, very simple, it's not rocket science. I will have a prioritized timeline or a time frame. So for example, week 1, I'm going to have, I might actually say week 1 and 2, assuming I'm in the start of the quarter, right? So I basically just go, if I'm starting the quarter and I'm doing PG planning, well, I'm in the first and second week of the quarter, I'm basically just going to say week 1 and 2, XYZ Corp, the stakeholder name, the transformation manager, or actually if it's easier, I might just say week 1 because I'll be refreshing this every week anyway. I usually have a look at it twice a week. So I will just go week 1, XYZ Corp, Bob, Bob's role as the transformation manager. I put these details as optional because you don't want to double handle. So if this is already in your CRM, don't worry about it. This is more just so we know, for the 2-week sprint that we're going to be prospecting, who do we want to focus on, right? So we don't need to go ham and start having contacts in here and all that stuff. That's just double handling. Make sure that your CRM is up to date though. I hate it when there's mobile numbers on a fucking spreadsheet, but then the contact card in the CRM is not active. And then if someone needs to call them, they don't have the number. It just starts getting painful. So I put the mobile and email as optional just because that should be in your CRM. these are the three columns that are most useful, right? So this is really just to track, have you initiated the outreach, right? And I've got drop down menus here. So initiated prospecting means that you've started, but you haven't had any cut through yet. They haven't responded. No response after 14 days. Well, that's a no-brainer, right? So you've done your prospecting outreach sequences, which, by the way, I'll talk to you about the triple sequence. And I have a full sequencing guide, which I have built out. Prospecting, here we go, copy of prospecting toolkit. So I do have literally this entire freaking toolkit that I've built out. And I will include that as one of the assets in the link, just because I'm feeling charitable. Well, where do we go? What did I just do there? There we go. All right, sorry. So no response after 14 days. Which basically means, well, reassess the contact, okay? If you get nothing after 14 days after you run your sequences and your triples, which don't worry, I'll talk to you about how to structure your sequencing. But if you get no response after 14 days, reassess that contact, right? That's usually a pretty good indicator. That you probably either need to try someone else or you need to bench that contact for a little bit. Some people just don't respond to calls, texts, emails, voicemails, LinkedIn's. Like they're just hard to get onto, or they just don't respond back to you. And if that's the case, don't be that annoying idiot after about 9 to 12 sort of days of running prospecting triples. You want to make sure you're not getting annoying. Rejected, well, that basically means they are the right fit, but they told you to fuck off, okay? Qualified out, which means they're not the right fit, they're not the right person to talk to. Booked a meeting, that's obviously what we want most of. And benched for now means that you are going to be, and a benched contact is obviously just parked for now, right? So we're not going to engage them any further. The reason I say benched is if you get no response after 14 days, like you've tried everything, you've done all your triple sequences, you've done the call, voicemail, email, you've done call, voicemail, text, call, email, LinkedIn, like you've done the triple sequences, which I'll talk to you like what those sequences need to look like. But assuming you've done all of those and you still get no cut through, it's probably time to bench them, right? The last column, or the second last column I have here, is who owns this account? Who owns this contact? So sometimes, what I will do is I might pick the same account, but I might give my manager someone that's quite senior up that I can tell I know that they have a relationship with. I'll be like, hey, if my manager's sold to someone in another account and they're in the account that I'm looking after now, I'll be like, hey, can you prospect that person that you closed a deal with before, right? So I'll delegate some responsibility out, and this is just for me to track it. I've got referrals from my colleagues, so if I know someone has connected with someone on LinkedIn and they have, again, done business with them, then I'll make sure that I tag that as a referral, and then I'll follow it up with the person that I asked for that referral, and I'll say, hey, Connor or Bob, have you gotten me in touch with that person? Or hey, here's an email, can you send it to that guy? Try to get me an introduction. I'll obviously tag my SDR, and then of course I'll tag myself for any self-generated pipeline. This, guys, is a really clean, simple way to just track what's happening in those sprint cycles, right? So like I said, work in 2-week sprint cycles. So you'll have your, we'll say week 1, and we'll say week 2, and we'll say week 3. And so I would basically have assuming you go 5 accounts every 2 weeks, then I'd basically just say list out your 5 accounts and contacts, tag it as week 1. At the end of your week 1, review all of them, update them to week 2, run your second week sprint. And then at the end of those 2 weeks, who hasn't gotten cut through, who has gotten cut through. So it's a little bit of a process just to see what's going on, but this will give you some good oversight. Now, when it comes to actually tracking the sequence activities, meaning it's like day 1, day 3, day 5, day 6, like whatever your activities are, whether it's call, voicemail, email, call, no voicemail, email 2, call, no voicemail, email 3, call, voicemail, LinkedIn 1, like whatever the sequence is, track that on your CRM. This is purely just a high level kind of overview of, who am I going after in my 2-week sprints, right? So when you see that you've hit an account for 2 weeks in a row, it's like, okay, I've hit an account 2 weeks in a row. I've gotten a meeting booked in with this guy. I haven't gotten a meeting with this guy. Don't really technically need this guy. Okay, I'm good. I can park this account. I can look at another account, right? So that's how you want to start using this to just get some oversight into where you're going. Now, going back to the not the unified sales dashboard, but let's go back to the PG planning tab. Now, you'll see over here, I've also got a section for talk tracks and messaging, right? Now, what you want to do is when you're preparing for your call blocks, you want to also go through all of the people that you're looking at, right? So let's take Bob over here. Bob's a transformation manager. What you want to do is go on to Bob's LinkedIn, okay? And I'm a big fan of this. Have a look at their LinkedIn to see if you can get some data, right? So for example, when I was prospecting to the Chief Technology Officer of Hoyts, I could see here on his LinkedIn that he literally had implementing remote monitoring as one of his projects. Now, when I was at Zscaler, that's when I was doing this particular prospect, we had a solution that could address that problem. So what you want to do is make sure that during your prep blocks, you are actually going and finding some tangible information that you can use during your calls. The other way you can do this, if there's nothing on their LinkedIn, have a look at the company they work for and see if you work with any of their peers. That's another really good way to warm up the call. The third one, and guys, this is fantastic, is someone can be working at a company, but they may have previously worked at a company that is already a customer, right? So again, anything to create familiarity, right? So that can be easily found on LinkedIn as well. Between these 3 methods, you can find any way to warm up a call. Honestly, they will either have something useful on their LinkedIn, they may potentially be working at a company that you work with one of their competitors or peers, or they were previously at a customer that's already procured your solution. And all 3 ways are great to identify something to make the call stickier and make some, create some familiarity. The other thing as well, and I see a lot of reps get this wrong, is this should be identified during the call planning blocks, right? So during your PG planning blocks, that's when you got to do this work. Don't be doing this work when you show up to do cold calls. That is not ideal, right? I see so many reps, oftentimes they show up and they're literally coming for their call blocks and they're like, oh yeah, let me start doing some of this prep work while I'm trying to make calls. That is so inefficient, right? You want to do this work ahead of time so that you're able to then be really efficient and really effective. The other thing that I'll say is, confidence and conviction. You can literally say anything, but if you're confident, you have massive amounts of confidence and conviction, it comes through on the call, right? Now, obviously, I'm not telling you to just get on a call and say anything, which is why I have the structure, which I'll talk you through in a second. But it's so important to have that confidence and conviction. And confidence and conviction, guys, comes from belief in your product. So how do you develop that belief in your product? Well, it's right here, right? Prior to cold calling, make sure that you familiarized yourself with 3 to 5 customer stories. Whatever solution you sell, you can find 3 to 5 customer stories. It's really straightforward. You can either speak to your colleagues and say, hey, give me some references of really good customers that absolutely love us in the region you're selling in. Or you can have a look at the global reference list and read a couple of the case studies and just become familiar with it, right? And so the best format to follow is problem, how you address the challenge, and your outcome, right? So you take a story of a customer. So for example, if I'll create one right now. Let's say XYZ Corp. XYZ Corp's challenges are, identity security. They had lots of contractors. They didn't know which contractors were getting access to what. They had no centralized way to manage them. how you address the challenge. You had an identity platform that was able to actually address all of those challenges by, by securing the identities, by, protecting organizations, by providing them, ability to manage privileges and get visibility into all the various accounts and where those accounts were going, so you could limit access and potential risks. And the outcome could be that you prevented a breach because you saw that there was a number of compromised identities that were trying to get access, and because you were able to block it, you were actually able to stop a breach because the companies that were trying to access your systems, they were actually compromised already. And because you're able to do that, you stopped a downstream attack. That is an example of a story, right? So you take the problem, how you solve the problem, and then the outcome that you delivered to the customer, right? So what you want to do is take 3 to 5 customer stories and get really freaking familiar with it. And I recommend that once a week you have a 30-minute block where, what you do is you just learn one more customer story. What this does, it constantly gives you customer stories so that you can keep fresh, right? So you have a constant sort of fresh source of stories that you can share on calls. This also is useful because it gives you a lot of confidence that your solution is good. Companies trust you. Like, people like what you sell. And when you believe that, that comes off in how you deliver the message to people. The other thing that I recommend is build out a name drop list, right? Or access a public reference list. This is really useful because you want to be able to reference customers quickly, right? So when you're on a call, right, and you call someone up and they're like, hey, sorry, who are you guys? You say, oh, look, no worries. I mean, we work with a number of people, a number of folks in healthcare. We work with St. Vincent's Health Australia. We work with Cavalry Care. I'm sure you actually know a lot of the people that we work with, right? So like when you have those stories, when you have the contacts, you have those logos, that allows you to very quickly bring up some references, and it creates intrigue. It's like, okay, well, yeah, I know those people. I work with, I've worked with them before, or, I've been in those companies before. Like, that's really interesting that you work with those organizations, right? So what you want to do is have this, so it gives you that confidence and that conviction prior to going into calls. Now, what I want to also briefly talk to you about is multi-threaded prospecting. Now, the idea with multi-threaded prospecting is really straightforward, okay? It's based on the premise that it takes 14 to 21 touches for you to actually get cut through with a prospect most often. So with that said, if you are literally just relying on calls, all you do is you make a call, right? You then make another call 2 days later. You then make another call 2 days later. Like, pretty soon they're going to start seeing this number popping up a lot, and they're going, who the hell is this person, right? And even if you're not leaving voicemails, and if you do leave voicemails, again, voicemails aren't contextualized. They don't have enough to go off to understand why you're reaching out to them. So they might be the right fit. They might be the right people for you to try to get a hold of. But if you're not giving them context, if you're not actually giving them sufficient reason to give you a call back, they're probably not going to give you a call back. So this is where I see a lot of reps get it wrong, is they are very single modality focused, right? You always get the SDRs or the account executives that are just the call guys, right? Like, they just call. They don't do anything but call. You get the ones that are just the email people. You get just the LinkedIn people, right? Like, there's always just the people that stick to one thing. What I'm telling you is the best way to get prospecting cut through is by doing what's called triples. Triples is an approach where you're basically using multiple modalities: phone, voicemail, text, email, and LinkedIn. And you're actually mixing them all together and sequencing them in different ways, right? So I've got an entire toolkit that I've created, and my team will include a link that you can actually download this and use this toolkit. I'll show you that in a second. But essentially, an example of what a triple would look like is 3 touches condensed into one. So for example, I would call, voicemail, email. I would call, voicemail, email number 2. Then maybe on the 4th day, so I'd go first day, call, voicemail, email, second day, or third day, sorry. So let's say Monday was the first day. On Wednesday, I'd give them call, no voicemail. I would give them maybe a LinkedIn ad and then email sequence number 2. Then on Friday, I might give them call, another voicemail, email sequence number 3, right? So what you're doing here is actually you're condensing touches. So if you think about it, it takes 14 to 21 touches for you to actually get a yes or a no from a prospect. Or to get any sort of response from them. Well, guess what? If you're doing in batches of 3, you're starting to reduce how quickly you're going to get to an answer. And I'm telling you, if you do triples properly, it is one of the most effective ways to get rapid cut through into your prospects. So this is why during my time in tech sales, I've always been able to book more meetings than most of the people that I worked with and outbook most of my SDRs. Like, guys, I was consistently outbooking my SDRs while their only job was to book meetings. I was doing meetings booked plus managing pipeline plus. Like, I was doing like 8 different things and still outbooking most of the SDRs. And the reason I was able to do that is because I used prospecting triples, which meant that I was insanely efficient, insanely effective. Now, you're probably looking at this and going, well, how do I actually sequence this? How do I actually make sense of this? Well, I have done a lot of that work for you, right? So I have a toolkit, a prospecting triples toolkit. You should be able to download it. And it literally outlines everything that you need. And I've actually kind of outlined how you go about doing it. So there's different sequences, right? So you can see here, 9-day triple touch sequence 1, 9-day triple touch sequence 2, 9-day triple touch sequence 3, 9-day triple touch sequence 4. All of these are sequenced out over 9 days, and they're all based on different assumptions. So this set of sequences is assuming you have a valid number, an email, and a LinkedIn, okay? Now, if you don't have that, so let's say you have no number, but you have an email, then you use this sequence. If you have a number but no email, then you use this sequence. If you have no number and no email, well, what do you do there? Well, you do this sequence, right? So all of the sequences are laid out, and guess what? Because I am, again, trying to help you guys out, I have all the email sequences laid out over here. All you need to do is pick a relevant opener, punch in the details, and then rinse, repeat that across all the different sequences. I won't go through and unpack all of this for you. It's pretty self-explanatory. So you should be able to go through and make sense of this. But what I recommend is, firstly, I am not a fan of recreating fresh stuff all the time, which is why I like to templatize things with just the right amount of personalization, which is why I have these sort of blocks where you can just punch in the details and personalize this. But what I also like to do is rinse and repeat the same kind of body of the email. So if you have a look over here, right? So if you take email sequence number 1, it's got the standard, pick your own poison, pick your own opener, what you want to use. Email sequence 2, I basically used the same body, but I just changed the opener. So I said, hey, I appreciate you're busy. I'm just circling back on my previous message. And then email number 3, I just said, hey, circling back one last time. If it's not relevant, I don't want to bother. I'd love some feedback on the below. Same body. Right? Same body. Again, what you're doing is this allows you to cut down time and customization and crap, right? You don't want to customize crap. You just want to be using the same thing with a edited intro to make sense of why you're reaching out to them the second and the third time. Likewise, for your LinkedIn, right? So when you need to switch from email to LinkedIn, let's say you've done your 3 touches on email, then you can basically switch to LinkedIn. And you can say, hey, Andrew, I shot you a message via email. I appreciate a busy inbox, as I sometimes have the same. Just thought I'd surface this to get your thoughts. As mentioned in my email, insert body, right? This is how you efficiently prospect. And I've got 3 sequences for email, 3 sequences for LinkedIn, and I've got an entire sequencing guide here. So you can have a look to figure out how you want to sequence this, which is a nice, simple way to effectively do your triples. Now, the other thing that I have here for you is if you go down to the bottom, I've got a text template because some of the sequences involve using texts. So you can use a standard text template, right? You can use a breakup text template, and then there's also a voicemail template if you want to use it, but I tend to freestyle my voicemail. So sometimes I leave very short ones, sometimes I leave slightly longer ones. But again, I won't go through and spell all of this out for you, but that is at a high level what triples are, and take some time, go through this guide, familiarize yourself with it, create some of those assets for yourself. Like I said, I do have a lot of one-on-one work that I do with folks where we actually really custom build this stuff out for you. So if you want to sort of explore what working with me looks like a little bit more in depth and kind of speeding up all of this process and implementing this more quickly into your business, book some time with me below. We can have a chat. But I'm telling you guys, like, multi-threaded prospecting and triples is one of the most effective ways to get massive cut through with prospecting. If you're not doing triples, if you're not doing multi-threaded prospecting, you are literally leaving money on the table, okay? I have had so many deals start because I effectively prospected them. I used this multi-threaded approach and I was able to get rapid cut through. If you're not doing this, you are literally leaving money on the table, okay? And now, I've talked to you about obviously your cold call or your warm calling prep as well. Just one note on this, by the way, any of your talk tracks from this, you want to make sure that you're putting it into your talk track / messaging over here, right? So you want to make sure that, again, during your prep block, you're doing this work, okay? Don't skip this, because I'm telling you, it's all about being prepared, because the one shot you get, you better get that shot. You better not miss. And the best way to make sure you don't miss is by being prepared, okay? I see so many reps miss the opportunity to get a meeting booked because they show up onto that call and then they're like, they're surprised someone picked up, and then they just bobble it. They're like, oh, can I get some time with you? And then the guy's like, no, like, who are you? Why are you calling me? Like, there's no value being created. Shortcut all of that by following these steps, okay? It makes you highly effective. Now, let's get into the fun stuff. How to do a cold call, or as I like to say, a warm call, because no call is cold. You can warm it up. So, like I said, no cold call is truly cold, right? So, how I like to run my cold calls, very straightforward. I've broken it down into 3 different sections, right? So, the first section is essentially the opener, and what I like to call finding the CEO of the problem, right? So it's very simple, and I'll literally role play it as if I was calling you through the screen, right? So I'm going to pretend that I'm calling from CrowdStrike. So I'd literally call you and I'd say, hi, it's Joe from CrowdStrike. How have you been? I'm just, by the way, pause, time out from the role play. The reason I say, how have you been, or how have you been, is because instead of saying, how are you, how have you been is actually a pattern interrupt. When you say, how have you been, it actually implies that you have spoken to them before, and it immediately creates some sort of familiarity. But like I said, it's a pattern interrupt. So they go, I've been good. And then in the back of their mind, they're like, Joe CrowdStrike. That gives you just enough, right? Just enough kind of leeway to be able to get in with the intro, which is really the key part. We want to be able to slide in with that intro, because that intro is your foot in the door, right? And essentially what I say, by the way, I'd gauge their response, right? So if they say, yeah, I'm good, and they sort of have this like tentative tone of like, yeah, I'm good. Wait, Joe CrowdStrike. And then you pop straight in there with the intro, right? So you say, hey, let's say their name's Bob. You say, hey, Bob, look, like I said, calling from CrowdStrike. Look, context, we help a number of folks in your space, and you want to drop a couple of references, okay? So this is where I'd usually say reference 1, reference 2. So we know how I talked about having that name drop list. That's why you have that name drop list, right? So you want to have that name drop list next to you. So if you're calling a healthcare company, you got a couple of references you can reference right away. So you can say, look, Rob, like I mentioned, Joe from CrowdStrike. We actually work quite closely with Calvary Care and St. Vincent's Healthcare Australia, specifically helping them with their detection and response of advanced cyber threats. Hey, I appreciate I've reached out to you out of the blue. I just need a little guidance. I'm not sure if what we do is relevant to your company, but I'm looking to share some context with the right person who looks after cyber response. Out of curiosity, is that up your alley? Is that something that you are responsible for or take an active interest in? So pause, time out from the role play. What I've just done is I've come in, I've quickly introduced myself. I've gotten a little bit of a temperature check with the how have you been statement that, again, just gives you a little bit of time to be able to slide in with your intro. I've dropped a couple of references. I've mentioned the key problem that we address, and I've asked them a question. Which is, hey, is this relevant to you at all? Okay. What you're doing here is you're trying to find the CEO of the problem. Okay. So it's so important that you do this, because if you can't find the CEO of the problem, or you're trying to sell to the wrong person, then you really have no business calling this person, right? Like, I always talk about this idea that in every company you call, there is always someone who is responsible for solving the problem that you have a solution for. Your job is to find that person. Your job is not to just find any person. Your job is to find the right person. So qualify that early. Find the CEO of the problem, right? So then you get the yay or nay, right? So they'll either tell you, they'll be like, yeah, look, that is something that's relevant to me. I mean, what's this about, right? And then you follow in with the next part, which is you want to establish urgency. So you say, hey, look, like I said, I don't want to keep you here, but I do have a question. I mean, given that cyber response is relevant to you, are you in the business currently facing this challenge, or is this something that you're looking to assess, in the next 6 to 9 months or earlier? And then you pause and you see if they are the CEO of the problem, do they have an active issue that they're looking to address, right? So what you're trying to do is establish urgency. So they'll either tell you, they'll be like, yeah, okay, look, I mean, it's not an imminent problem, but we might be looking to address it in the next little while. Why? Then you can basically lead in with the hook, right? So that's where you say, well, Bob, like I mentioned in the past or earlier in the call, we've helped Cavalry Care and St. Vincent's Australia, which I understand would be peers in your industry, to actually address this challenge through some of our capabilities. We have a number of capabilities in terms of, detection and response, really tailored to healthcare. Then you go time out, then you go for the close, right? So you say, look, I'd love to tee up a coffee with you or a call in the next few weeks, depending on whether or not this lines up with your priorities, and share a little bit of industry insights. I'd love to share how your peers are tackling this challenge with us. And I don't want to keep you on this call and flood you with details now, but if it's relevant to you, I'd love to give you a little bit more insight over a bit of a chat. Would you be open to setting up a bit of a chat to explore this a little bit further? Then you lock in the time, right? So this is the ideal structure you want to follow. I was using this at Gartner. I was using this at CrowdStrike. I was using this at Zscaler. I'm telling you, this shit works. Now, what you want to do is wordsmith this and find your own variation, right? Because I have slightly different words that I would use. You would have slightly different words that you would use, but you want to follow this structure. Open the call, find the CEO of the problem, establish urgency, lead in with the hook and give them a mini value proposition, close the call. Now, after you lock in the time, what you want to do, and this is such a powerful technique, I like to call this the agenda, kind of like the agenda close, right? And what you're doing here is you're basically saying, hey, by the way, just so I can come prepared with the most relevant data to that session, I mentioned a few things above. Is there anything specific you'd like me to hone in on, right? What you want to do is, and let me just highlight this actually, right? Then you want to ask them, whatever they tell you, say, hey, is that an active priority? Is there any secondary priorities you'd like me to cover, right? So what you're trying to do here is you're basically saying, hey, for that call that we have coming up, is there any specific stuff that you'd like me to cover, right? What would make this the most valuable use of your time? And this is a two-part kind of technique that you're using. Number one, what you're doing is you're going to increase your show up rates, right? Like the likelihood of them showing up to this call is way higher because you're asking them this question. What you can also do is you can take what they share, put that into the agenda in the call invite that you're going to send them, and also, as an added value, if they shared something that you have a nice white paper for, include that in a quick email to them when you send them your details, right? This is how you start to differentiate yourself as a mid-market or a commercial account executive, right? It's these little hacks. So let's just go top to bottom again, right? And I'll give you another variation of what this call could sound like so you can just listen to it. And I'll literally do the call again. And if you need to record this or download this, do what you need to make sure that you have this call flow, right? So let's do this. Let's say I'm calling you. Ring, ring. Hi, it's Joe from CrowdStrike. How have you been? Hey, Bob, as I mentioned, Joe from CrowdStrike, we actually work with a number of folks in your space, such as Cavalry Care and St. Vincent's Australia. We actually help them with their cyber detection and response of very sophisticated cyber threats or anyone that is trying to get access to their data. I appreciate I've just reached out to you. I just need a little bit of guidance. I'm not sure if what we do is relevant to our to your company, and I'm just curious, that whole area of cyber detection and response, is that relevant to you? Are you someone that kind of takes an interest in that or looks after that area? Hey, thanks for that. Like I said, I don't want to keep you here and I don't want to give you any sort of pitch. I do just want to clarify one thing as well, and maybe I'll give you a tiny bit of a context around what we do in the space. But given that cyber detection and response is relevant to you, are you in the business currently facing that as a challenge? Is that something that you're looking to reassess if you maybe have some existing partners? Or are you exploring this sort of in the next 3, 6, 9 months or earlier, right? Is this an active priority or a bit of a mid to long-term priority for you? Well, thanks for sharing. Like I mentioned just earlier in the call, we have helped a number of folks in the healthcare space. You probably know some of those people in those companies that I mentioned. We've got long-standing relationships with them. We actually help them address those challenges with our capabilities. We have a number of detection and response capabilities. I won't go into the details now, but what I'd love to do is, if you're open to it, I'd love to tee up a coffee, or we could do a Zoom. Me personally, I'm getting a little sick of Zooms just with all the work from home stuff. But if you're free in the next couple of weeks or in the next month, depending on your timelines and how this lines up with your priorities, I'd love to share some industry insights, some stories of how we're working with your peers and helping them tackle this challenge. Would you be open to teeing up some time in the next couple of weeks to discuss this a little bit further? Thanks for that time. I'll send you the invite. Hey, just so I can come prepared with the most relevant stuff for that call, the most relevant insights, the most relevant data for that call, I mentioned a few things before around who we work with and roughly how we work with them. But is there something specific that you'd like me to hone in on, right? Is there something that would be really useful for you to understand on that catch up? Awesome. I will send through a calendar invite with those details so that we can catch up at that time. Time out, finish the role play, right? So this is the ideal call structure, right? Now, like I said, the words can change a little bit. Like, I haven't word for word given you the exact verbatim, but what you want to do is really just follow that structure. Open the call, find the CEO of the problem, establish urgency, give them a mini value proposition, lock in the time, do the agenda close, get off the call, send them the invite, include what they said in the agenda, send them a white paper or send them at least an email with your details and recap some of the things that they shared with you. That is how you stand out as a mid-market or a commercial account executive and start coming off as highly credible and strategic from the get-go. Now, this is not an easy way to do a cold call if you've been operating a different way, right? But it is a highly effective way. So take some time to actually rework your script and use this framework, use this template. I'm telling you, this shit works. I've had blitz days where I've comfortably booked anywhere from 10 to 20 meetings in a day. New discoveries, right? On blitz days, not like every day, but on blitz days, we've literally done this stuff, right? Like, I'm telling you, this framework works. It's highly effective and it's very strategic. It gives you a lot of credibility. Now, there's a couple things that I'll also mention here. What I like to call cold call no-nos, right? And again, I know I keep saying cold call, but really no call is ever cold. You can find ways to warm it up. But here's some no-nos. Firstly, never ask a sensitive professional questions too early. I have heard SDRs do this where, it's a cold call and literally within 30 seconds of having a chat to someone, they say, what's your cyber strategy? Don't do that, right? If you're selling really sensitive technology, for example, cyber, data technology, anything that is very, nuanced, sophisticated, and sensitive, don't lead in with very sensitive questions on a prospecting call, right? The goal of a prospecting call is to get in, establish trust, establish relevance, give them a little bit of value, make sure you're speaking to the right person, book the meeting, and get the fuck off the call, right? You don't want to stay there and trying to like keep it going. You've just called them out of the blue. The next thing is this a bad time? Like, no shit, dude. It's always a bad time, right? Especially with execs. They never have a good time. The other one is this is a cold call. You don't tell someone this is a cold call, right? And like I said here, you're not a fucking appointment center. You're a business professional, right? You never see a CEO calling another CEO and saying, hey, mate, this is a cold call, right? They show up and they're like, yo, it's Joe. I'm the founder of this company, right? You want to come in with that big sales energy, right? You're not an appointment setter. You're a business professional. You work with their peers in the industry. Your company supports some of the biggest names in the industry. They are lucky to be getting a call from you. That is the attitude you want to show up with in B2B tech sales, right? You want to come in with that big sales energy. Not knowing what you do in depth, right? And not being able to articulate that in simple terms. Like, this is a huge problem, right? Like, if you don't know what you do in depth, it's because you haven't done the work to understand your solution. The best way to understand your solution is go back up the modules, look at the modules where I talk about how to build out your ICP, your ideal customer profile, and start with the pain points. What pain points do you solve for your customer? Get really fucking good at understanding customer pain points. The other part is you want to make sure that you understand customer stories really well, right? 3 to 5 customer stories. Take the time to understand customer stories, learn them in the format that I recommended, start with the problem, then articulate the solution, and then articulate the outcome. Be able to do that really, really fluently. That is so critical. Anyways, I know that this is a pretty dense video. I've covered a lot of stuff in here. There's a few different assets that you can use as well, right? So I've obviously got the prospecting toolkit over here. So my team will have that included, so you can access that. So go ahead, download some of these assets, go through the cold call script, make this your own, right? Like, edit it slightly, make the verbiage, the sort of language that you would use, but use this framework. Trust me, it works. It's highly effective, and it takes the pressure off you to try to pitch them. You're not trying to pitch them. You're trying to find the right person with the problem that you can solve for. When you make that mindset shift, prospecting becomes way easier because you're not trying to pitch, you're trying to advise, you're trying to find the right person. You're trying to make someone's day better by getting them access to a solution to a problem that is literally keeping them up at night, okay? Anyways, hope that was useful. We've got some more stuff to get through in the next few videos. Like I said, this is part of a broader series of mid-market account executive readiness. The playlist is down below. Access that playlist. If you need any further help or you're really struggling, then book some time with me. We can have a chat and see if there's any value in us working together. If that was useful, I'll catch you on the next one. Take care.